Coming up on Network Africa, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres arrives in Kenya to assess the situation in Sudan. World Food Programme warns that Sudan conflict could destabilize the entire region. Plus, over 100 people killed in Rwanda floods and landslides. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers in Lagos. It's no news that Sudan's warring military factions have agreed in principle to a 7-day ceasefire from Thursday, May the 4th to May the 11th. But a statement released by the Foreign Ministry of South Sudan, which had offered to mediate in the conflict, said its President Salva Kiir stressed the importance of a longer truce and of naming envoys to peace talks to which both sides had agreed. However, the credibility of the reported May 4th to 11th deal ceasefire between Sudanese Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and paramilitary Rapid Support Forces leader General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo was unclear given the rampant violations that undermine previous agreements running from 24 to 72 hours. While more airstrikes and shooting are reported in the Khartoum region, disrupted the latest short-term truce. Footage show plumes of smoke rising from Khartoum and Khartoum North ahead of Thursday's agreed truce. UN officials say Sudan's war has forced 100,000 people to flee over its borders, and fighting now in its third week is creating a humanitarian crisis. The conflict risks developing into a broader disaster as Sudan's impoverished neighbor deals with the refugee crunch, and fighting hampers aid deliveries in a nation where 2/3 of the people already rely on some outside assistance. In the meantime, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has arrived in Kenya to follow up on the humanitarian and security situation in Sudan following weeks of clashes. Mr. Guterres was received by Kenya's Foreign Affairs Minister Alfred Mutua at the main airport in the capital, Nairobi. During his 2-day visit, the UN chief will hold talks with Kenyan President William Ruto and also meet all heads of UN agencies in the Kenyan capital. Meanwhile, Canada's Foreign Minister Melanie Joly has called on both sides in the Sudan conflict to obey humanitarian law. Speaking in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, she told the media the UN must be able to do its work. It's important that people in Sudan have access to food, to water, and to medicine. She met her Kenyan counterpart, Alfred Mutua, and the pair discussed ways that both countries could support efforts to bring stability to Sudan.
The UN must be able to do its work. And so it is important that people in Sudan have access to food, to water, to medicine. There's right now 59 hospitals of the 79 hospitals that are closed. That's unacceptable. Humanitarian law must be respected, and this is a clear message that Canada is sending to the two generals.
Kenya remains ready to host talks aimed at stabilizing Sudan and holding a conversation on the future of Sudan. President Ruto has stated that Kenya will support the UN in its humanitarian efforts, and I agree with you, the UN really needs to get down and do its work.
Yeah.
And in addition, even as we support the humanitarians, we tell the UN to do its work, we will avail Kenya's airspace, including airports such as Lokichogio, Eldoret, and others, for humanitarian support, as well as technical support for any special operation.
In the meantime, a World Food Programme official is warning that the continuous conflict in Sudan could destabilize the whole region of northeast Africa. Humanitarian workers say that the conflict risks morphing into a broader disaster as Sudan's poor neighbors deal with a refugee crisis and fighting blocks aid routes. The World Food Programme Regional Communications Officer Brenda Kariuki says the ripple effect of the conflicts on the region is significant.
For WFP, our biggest concern right now is actually that if the conflict in Sudan doesn't stop soon, the ripple effect across the region is significant. We are already seeing at least 20,000 refugees that have crossed into Chad. Our colleagues in South Sudan are saying a similar number, if not more, is crossing into South Sudan. We are thinking about refugees who are in Sudan going back to their home countries that are not as stable as they should be when they are going back. So the ripple effect for the region is significant. It's a real concern, and we just need to find peace. We need the two parties to the conflict to come together and find a way to resolve the conflict, because this has the possibility of destabilizing the whole region. For humanitarian aid to reach the people that need it the most, we need to have safe access. And once the conflict broke out, we saw a lot of our access suddenly disappear. We had colleagues that were caught in the line of fire and unfortunately lost their lives. And as you can imagine, we had to suspend our operations to assess, is it safe for us to still reach the people that need us the most? And I believe a lot of the humanitarian agencies, the UN and other partners, are facing the same challenge. Access is not assured. Safety of our humanitarian workers is key. And for us to really reach those people, we need to be sure we can get to them safely, and also that the people we are reaching are not in the line of fire. So that disruption has been massive. I think a lot of the agencies have had to completely suspend operations. We're just starting now to see how we can reach the people in places that are relatively safer.
Staying with developments in Sudan, U.S. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel says the U.S. consulate in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, has welcomed and offered consular services to more than 350 U.S. citizens and U.S. legal permanent residents who have left Sudan. Mr. Patel also said the U.S. government is in touch with 5,000 American citizens who do not necessarily want to depart Sudan, but have sought communication with the U.S. Over the weekend, U.S. government facilitated convoys successfully enabled groups of U.S. citizens, their family members and nationals from partner countries to arrive safely in Port Sudan.
We can confirm that our consulate in Jeddah has welcomed and offered consular services to more than 350 American citizens and legal permanent residents who have departed Sudan safely and have made their way through Jeddah. I will note that this is from the various modalities that have been available to people seeking to depart Sudan over the course of since this violence intensified, not specifically just from this weekend's convoys. We have communicated with 5,000 American citizens who have sought to seek communication and be in touch with the American government. Not necessarily depart Sudan, but be in touch with us. Of that population, a fraction have sought to safely depart Sudan. Since the violence began, we can confirm through our mechanisms, through mechanisms of allies and partners, we have facilitated the departure of over 1,000 U.S. citizens from Sudan. This 3 convoys that took place over the course of this past weekend assisted 700 individuals made up of American citizens, of LPRs, of locally employed staff, of citizens of allied and partner countries as well. And then break, over the course of this crisis, our consulate in Jeddah has welcomed and offered consular services of more than 350 American citizens and LPRs from Sudan who have made their way to safety to Jeddah.
Meanwhile, White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre says humanitarian agencies must be given access to help people in Sudan amid more fighting in the country despite a supposed truce. Previous ceasefires have ranged in theory from 24 to 72 hours, but have been constantly violated in the conflict that erupted in mid-April between the army and a paramilitary force.
We remain gravely concerned about the unfolding humanitarian situation in Sudan, including rapidly deteriorating humanitarian condition. This widespread violence compounds an already dire situation. The SAF and also the RSF must follow safe access for humanitarian agencies and their workers to support the Sudanese people. As access and security permit, U.S.-funded humanitarian partners are present on the borders and working with local authorities to provide services to those in need, including access to emergency food, water, and medical support. We are planning to use all available means, including using the pre-positioned medical and food supplies to ensure that humanitarian assistance can resume once security conditions permit. Again, look, we remain in close contact with the Sudanese military and civilian leaders to see what we can to help them identify a path to reach a sustainable cessation of hostilities that include humanitarian arrangements, and we are engaged at the highest levels regularly. I had said this yesterday, I'll say this again, the president's the senior level of the president's national security team has been in direct contact with SAF and RSF leadership, and we have called to continue the ceasefire. We have called to bring down, to stop what we've been seeing, the violence there. We've been doing that for the past week and being very vocal on that, to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. And they'd be doing that at the expense of our nation's veterans.
In the meantime, Sudanese Americans and others with dual nationalities have boarded small boats towards a ship in Port Sudan for evacuation. Citizens were either taken to Jeddah via the sea or on a plane headed to Cyprus, assisted by UK and US government representatives.
Actually, we are living in UK. We started the process with the UK government, and then because of our kids' nationality, we supposed to go with the US embassy. They did a lot of efforts, to be honest. The group has a lot of numbers of people, and they did a lot of effort to help as much as they could. And finally, we are now departing from Port Sudan to Jeddah, and then from the Jeddah we are going to UK.
Still to come on the program. For more on the Sudan crisis, and we'll be joined by the VOA's Africa correspondent, Mariama Diallo. Plus, Senegalese entrepreneur creates first locally made safe surfboards. Details in a moment. Welcome back to the program. We're still talking Sudan and the situation in the last 24 hours. The VOA's Africa correspondent, Mariama Diallo, joins me now from Nairobi, Kenya. Mariama, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you again for having me.
Right, so the warring military factions in Sudan have agreed to a 7-day truce starting tomorrow. What more can you tell us about the situation as we speak?
Well, I think we're all just holding our breaths, waiting to see if this latest ceasefire is actually going to hold. Because when you think about it from the beginning, whether it was the first ones that were trying to be by the United Nations or the ones that the States, we have Saudi Arabia and other countries, and the last one with the help of Kenya, Djibouti, other countries. I guess at this point, we know that none of them, none of the ceasefires have helped so far. And so people are hoping that international organizations and organizations trying to see outside the country develop safe bases in Sudan. So I guess we'll find out when it comes.
Right, so the UN Chief Antonio Guterres is in Kenya, to assess the situation in Sudan and see what can be done, especially because of the humanitarian crisis there. People need aid for a country that already relies on outside help, and what can be done. Give us an update on his itinerary.
Well, he actually did a presser, and I participated. I was just there, just got back right now, took questions from reporters. And again, he talked about this latest ceasefire that's going to go into effect tomorrow, and pleaded for the parties to kind of respect the ceasefire. He says that fighting needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. And I'm quoting him directly, before people die, that this conflict explodes into an outpour that could affect the region for years to come. That's what he said. And again, he emphasized things that everybody have been saying and everything I'm sure the UN has been seeing, that the Sudanese people are facing humanitarian catastrophe. Hospitals have been destroyed. Millions are facing food security. Let's not forget that before even this conflict, there were a number of people who were facing food security. So this added war, it has made things even worse at this point. So I think he pleaded on the parties, on General Burhan and General Hemedti, to just basically, take a break or take a breather, make sure that the ceasefire holds, no matter how long, just even if it's a 24-hour, 48 hours, 72 hours, and then take it from there. But I think that at this point, he's going to be here today. He's supposed to have a state dinner later on with President Ruto. And from here, he goes to Bujumbura in Burundi tomorrow. I think tomorrow, or he's participating at a conference tomorrow. And then on Friday, he ends up in Burundi, where he's also going to highlight some of those peace processes. As you know, the DRC has gone through one. Ethiopia has gone through one. So I think he's also going to be there talking about those topics on that end. But here, the presser here, most of the questions were definitely concentrated on Sudan. And I think at some point he was even asked about the UN, if the UN is feeling like they've kind of failed Sudan. And, he seemed like what he was trying to explain was that, he seems to say that, they were caught by surprise. Although a lot of people, when you talk about analysts and other people in the region, some people say they could see it coming because there were tensions. But maybe up to this scale, nobody was expecting it, including the UN chief.
Right. So, Mariama, you just mentioned that the UN chief will be visiting some other countries as well, bordering Sudan, neighboring countries. What do you make of their role as regards peace talks, given that they might be the ones bearing the burden of refugees running from the country in Sudan, from the conflict in Sudan?
But I think at this point, from the rough estimates that we've been hearing from international organizations, and I actually know that about what they're saying, and again, I'm pretty sure these are rough estimates, that 15,000 people have fled to Sudan. And on that number, 88%, nearly 90% are actually returnees, people who had fled to South Sudan, fleeing their own conflict, who now don't have a choice and they have to go back. And I think they're talking about 7,000 going into Ethiopia. In Chad, the numbers have been changing from 20,000 to 30,000. I'm sure, again, they're very rough estimates. And we know that Chad has also has taken, almost maybe 400,000 refugees in the past. So those countries, I mean, and I think all of them really are trying. It's not just South Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya. I think everyone in the region is trying to find a way to help. And I think today the UN chief talked about the fact that UNHCR is scaling up and trying to try to be in most of those neighboring countries in order to be able to lend a hand. But I'm sure UNHCR is not just the one organization cannot take care of it. The scale is too big. It's enormous. I think other people need to step in. Otherwise, you don't even need to not help. If you don't help, it affects you directly. So everybody needs to be active at this point, and I think everyone is doing their best.
Right,
from what it looks.
Mariama, thank you for an update on the situation, and please keep safe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
To other stories now, the death toll from landslides and floods in Rwanda has risen to more than 100 amid heavy rains in the country. Authorities report that 109 people have died so far, 95 of those in the western province and 14 in the north. Earlier, the governor of the country's western province, Francois Habitegeko, said at least 50 people have died after heavy rains pounded the region all night. He said rescue activities in remote areas are underway, with the number of victims likely to go up. However, the Rwandan Meteorological Agency has warned of heavy rains throughout this month. And finally on the program, with 700 kilometers of coastline, Senegal has been attracting surfers from around the globe since the 1960s, with the main surfing areas located around the capital. That's what has given birth to Pape Diof's trade. He makes surfboards and is increasingly using locally sourced materials, making it cheaper for locals and international surf enthusiasts.
In a small beachside shack in Senegal's capital, Dakar, Pape Diof spends hours on each surfboard he makes, shaping its foam surface with an electric planer to create the perfect curve. Diof, 27, is the first surfboard maker in the West African country, which has attracted surfers from around the world for decades due to Dakar's position on a spit of land that juts out into the Atlantic Ocean, creating world-class waves. He started Sunugal Surfboard Repair with only 5,000 euros and 2 boards. It has since grown into a flourishing business. His boards praised by surfers who appreciate their quality.
The goal is to sell them for a little less. For that, we need to find a little more material locally. It's an idea we're working on, and soon we'll be able to industrialize, perhaps not only for Senegal, but for all Africa.
For enthusiasts like professional surfer Ismaila Samb, having local access to boards that can handle Dakar's urban beaches is essential.
It is a board that will adapt to all conditions because it is a board that floats, has a lot of volume, and is wide. It's also easy to handle in water, so it's such a cool board.
Another athlete who competes with a board made by Diof, Aïta Diop, is happy for the local manufacturer because shipping in expensive boards from abroad often prices people out of the sport. Diof's dream is to see people using his surfboards to ride waves throughout the world.
Well, that's the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.